Welcome back to Key Messianic Prophecies, a podcast brought to you by Telios, a private 501c3 nonprofit foundation dedicated to the research and accurate teaching of the Bible, founded by Bill and Jeanette Stewart. On this episode, we will finish up our look at the Psalms with Psalm 132. Now, Psalm 132 does some interesting things. Probably the first thing you're going to notice is that pretty much the entire psalm is simply repetition of older parts of the Hebrew Scriptures. Just some examples. We find here the priestly language from Numbers 10. We find kingship promises and prayers from 2 Samuel and 2 Chronicles. We glimpse references of David's retrieval of the ark, the temple being built, the high priest's crown, and the list goes on. We see references to Psalm 89 and Psalm 110 as well, and we see two direct references to Israel's Messiah, the Anointed One. So there's a lot going on here in Psalm 132. Regarding the Psalm's placement within the latter parts of the Psalter, we see that Psalm 132 is the only royal psalm contained within the Psalms of Ascent. The Psalms of Ascent are Psalms 120 through Psalms 134. Psalm 134. And those Psalms of Ascent, as they're called, are designed to give worshipers hope in the realization that God has not abandoned his people during their pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So they're ascending the mountain, the Psalms of Ascent. Psalm 132 is a royal psalm that assures the pilgrim peoples that God's presence will return to Israel and she will have her Davidic Messiah. Now, the reliance on previous data from other Old Testament stories and books communicates something about the character of God. As worshipers sing the psalms and songs of ascent, this psalm, in a sense, rehearses key moments in Israel's history where God continued to keep his promises to Israel, despite whatever circumstances they find themselves in. This is actually a very common thing that you will see happening all throughout the Old Testament. In order to look for hope in a present circumstance, they will often be looking back to prior instances where God proved himself to be faithful as evidence of his continued faithfulness. So no matter how things were in the past, no matter how bad things were in the past, God remained faithful to Israel. Even when Israel herself did not remain faithful to God, he remained faithful to her. That's a recurring theme throughout the Old Testament. And no matter where things went in the future, God would continue to remain faithful. The past examples of his faithful character being proof positive of that. And this will continue into the New Testament. Paul, in Romans especially, is going to make a very famous and fantastic case for God's continued faithfulness to Israel, even into the end, even during the church age, which sees this mass influx of the Gentiles into the faith. So this psalm ultimately looks forward in hope of the Messianic restoration of the Davidic throne and is a great psalm to end our study of this book with. This podcast has been about tracing Messianic prophecy throughout the Old Testament, and Messianic prophecy is all over the Psalter. That's why we spend a considerable amount of time in this particular book. Psalm 132 is a great psalm that anticipates the future coming of the Messiah to restore the Davidic throne, and is a good one to sort of transition out of the Psalms with. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Key Messianic Prophecies. On the next episode, we will leave the Psalms behind and move into the book of Isaiah.